go. Open the chat. And we'll open up the participants so I can see who's all here. All right, let's recap what we did last week. Give me 1 second just to pull that up. Sorry, a little behind, just helping students, and I just kind of put myself a bit behind. Right. We talked about just basic PHP. We talked about variables and how to define variables. The various different data types that variables in PHP have. I just realized I'm not recording in there. Perfect. All right, the different data types that PHP supports. We learned that PHP is an implicitly data typed language, meaning that when you define a value to your variable, it's then automatically implied what the data type for that variable will be, but it's not married to that data type, meaning that it can change at a later time, and that's super important to understand. We looked at arrays, and we learned a very golden rule about arrays. Can anybody remember the number one rule about arrays in PHP? All arrays are what? Anybody want to take a guess? Yes, all arrays in PHP are associative arrays. So that means that, yes, when you define an array right off the bat, it will be numerically indexed, but it doesn't have to be. It can be changed later on to be alphanumerically indexed, meaning that you can actually give each index a key and therefore treat it almost as if you're working with a struct, right? And those keys and values can be, well, the keys can't be, but the values can be of any data type that you want, including mixed data types within your associative array. Then we learned about some super globals, and there's a bunch of them available inside PHP, right? Two of the ones that we'll be using quite often are get and post. They're very important because they allow us to be able to interact with requests from the browser. So that's data that either comes through the parameters in the query string or data that comes from a form. So get and post are super, super crucial. We looked at we talked a little bit about the other super globals that exist, such as server, which gives us lots of information about our server in particular. There's also session, and there is cookie, but we didn't touch on those yet, but we will be taking a look at both of those when we start getting into things like authentication. That's when they become super important. So did anybody have any questions about any of the stuff that we learned last week before we dive into this week? No? Cool. So this week we're going to work with relational databases. So I like to give 2 weeks where you guys have had time with your relational database teacher and you've learned to do some cool things in your relational database class. Now, depending on the teacher, I know you guys have likely done tons and tons of select statements by this point. However, have you done any create statements, like an insert? Have you done an insert yet? Awesome. Awesome. That's good. So insert and select are super important. Have you guys done update or delete yet, out of curiosity? Not yet? Okay. So next week we'll be doing update and delete. So I'm hoping that I'm in alignment with your relational database teacher, and next week you will do update and delete. If not, we might get a bit ahead. That's not a big deal. I won't jump too far ahead, but we might get a little bit ahead. That just happens with these classes being taught like this. This class used to be taught by Rich Freeman, who also taught relational databases, so he made sure that the two classes coincided with each other. But now it's random teachers for both, so it's hard to make sure we're all coincided. Sorry, it's dry in here. Okay, relational databases. This is going to be a recap for you, likely, hopefully. So why do we need a database? Well, the static web is stateless, right? We talked about this last week a little bit, that the web is stateless, meaning if I, right now in here, was to right-click on this word MySQL, and I was to go, I'm going to change it from being Mysql colored black to pink, booyah, I just hack this website, right? It's pink now. I just changed the whole website. But if I hit refresh, it goes back to black. And the reason that is because the web is stateless. It means that it doesn't matter what changes I was to make within this browser, it's not saving them. It doesn't save them anywhere. It definitely doesn't save them to the server that's delivering this website, and it doesn't even save it to my client, right? Even if I could somehow save it on my client, maybe I could save some JavaScript that, automatically changes it to pink every time I come to this page, it would only affect me. It wouldn't affect other people that were on the site. And the reason is because your browser is stateless, meaning that your browser is only yours. It's your client, it's your stuff, it's whatever you're doing within it, but it doesn't affect the server that's delivering the site or any other user's browser. So that's an important concept to understand when it comes to working with the browser. So how do we maintain state? Well, there's a few different ways we can do that. One way, obviously, is to store it, right? Somehow store it. So we could store that I changed this to pink if I had access to this server on the server. And there's several different places that we could store state on the server. If I only wanted to save it for being pink for just me, just this one user, I could store it as a cookie and then deliver that cookie for this particular user and store it on their computer from the server. That cookie can then be read anytime somebody accesses this site and change it to whatever their preferred color is. That's one way. The other way is that I could store it in a flat file on my server. So I could create a flat file, like a JSON file or even just a text file, and I could store that color, and then when somebody comes to the server, I could go read that file and then change the color that I chose for this particular CSS to pink. So that's another way. But the more common way to store state is using a database. Databases are the more common way that we learn to store state. A database is cool because it allows us to be able to not only store things like state, but it also allows us to store relationships between data. So as much as we're going to store lots of different things in our databases, we will want to create a relationship, almost like a hierarchical relationship between the different data we're storing. So for example, I might have a table called authors. And in my table called authors, I might have a field in there called books, right? So say I want to add in an author like J.K. Rowling, right? And then I'm going to add in their books. Well, how do I store those books? There's different ways that we could take a look at how to store those books. We could potentially create a field inside that table that has a text block in it that stores up to 20,000 characters. So likely I'm not going to exceed 20,000 characters. I should be able to store J.K. Rowling's name, her contact information, her address information, and then all of the books she's ever written in a list. But there's some problems with that. One, that's a lot of information to put inside a record, and we want to keep our records fairly fluid. We want to make sure that they're very quick to access, and the more data that a record stores, the slower it is to access that data at a later time. So that's one bad kind of issue with it. Maybe I don't even need the books. I'm kind of taking the whole jungle with me every time I grab onto J.K. Rowling's record, because I'm going to get her name, her contact information, her address information, and all of the books she's written. Maybe the only thing I need is her contact information, and I don't need any of the other information that's coming with it. But unfortunately, when I access that particular author, I get everything that's associated with that record. Now, yes, I can selectively select columns that I want, but at the end of the day, the query is still going to occur, and this record is still going to wind up in memory, and that's still going to be slow. Okay? The other issue is how would I query books, for example, to find one particular book? If I wanted to find The Philosopher's Stone, for example, in order to query that, I would either have to do a very, very creative SQL query that supports fuzzy matching to allow me to find that book, or I would have to take the whole record down, parse it, and convert it into something that I could easily search. Either way, both of those are terrible solutions to this problem. So the better way to do it is to treat our data atomically. And that's to think about how data should be stored. So one other issue, before I move down, now that I remember what I was doing, is this information that we're looking at right now is also not very atomic. It's not broken down into its smallest form. So for example, name, right? Name's pretty generic. That's first name, last name, middle name. Maybe it's a bunch of initials. Maybe it's your hyphenated last name if you're married and you have a hyphenated name. All of those type of things can be really problematic when we start trying to search for these particular things. If I want to find J.K. Rowling, I would have to do a fuzzy search against name with the last name Rowling, and that's not very specific. I would much rather just search last name for Rowling and find that record directly and quickly. Fuzzy searches are costly because the SQL has to actually parse each line and then try to create the matches and then move on to the next row. That's a costly measure. It's much cheaper for me to just search for Rowling and match it to that last name without having to do fuzzy matching. So we want to be more atomic, and one way to be more atomic is by reducing our data to the smallest parts. So what we do is we take our name, for example, and we reduce it to the smallest two parts. Most times you want to be intelligent about this. There's no reason to break it down to first name, middle name, second middle name, third middle name, last name. That's just ridiculous. It makes more sense to just choose first name and last name unless there's a reason for you to store their middle name or a middle initial or any other information like that. So we want to break name down to atomically. So here you can see I've taken name and I've broken it down to first name and last name so it's in its atomic form. Contact information. Again, what contact information? We're not being specific here by asking for contact information. We need to be direct with our users and we need to be explicit and say, this is the contact information we require. If you ask somebody to fill out contact information, you will either get everything ever connected to this person, because they'll just write down literally everything, every address they've ever lived at, or you will get such minimal information, like a name, and you won't have enough information in order to actually permit whatever action it is that you were trying to do with that information. So it's better to break it up atomically. So if I take the contact information that's here and break it down into two fields, phone number and email, that's pretty atomic. So likely they're going to give me the phone number that they consider the one to contact them on, hopefully. We could go down even further and add in their work number and their cell phone number and be super atomic, right? That is also an option. And then their address information. Well, their address information, obviously address is too generic, right? It's too vague. We need to make that more atomic as well. So we're going to pull street address, postal code, city, province, countries, and then this books field. I can't break that down atomically because she's written more than one book. So I can't be like title, because now I'm saying I can only store one row with one title. And I'm sure not going to store her name, 12 times in the database just to get different books with all the same information, because that becomes redundant and we don't want to be redundant. So what do? Well, that's when we look at a relationship. And I'm not sure if you guys have talked about relationships in your database class, but a relationship is quite a simple concept. The idea behind a relationship is how does one piece of data relate to another piece of data or associate with another piece of data. So not only will you hear relationships sometimes you will hear associations, right? So our data, if we look at it, we can have books, and it's likely the author is going to have many, many books. So the better way to do it is to create a table called books. But we need some way to be able to connect the books table to the authors table so that these two things have a relationship to it. So when we think about that for a second, we think about the books, right? A book is likely only going to have one author. And yes, I know some things are dually written, and that's fine. But let's just simplify this, right? A book is likely going to have one author. So when we think about a book, we think this book will have one author. That is a one-to-one relationship when we go from books to author. So from books to author, our relationship is 1-to-1. Okay? However, when we go from authors to books, we now have to consider that an author can have written many, many books. So that becomes a one-to-many relationship, which means one author can have many books. The easier way to think of this is one parent, so this is our parent, can have many children. That's the easier way to think of it. However, a child will have one of those parents. Okay? I know children have more than one parent, but I'm saying in this particular example, this child has one parent. Does that make sense? I'm hoping that makes sense. Yeah? All right. Have you guys talked about data relationships in your SQL class yet? No? Not yet? All right. They're going to. A lot. Like, a lot. Because it's such a fundamental point. There's no point in using a relational database if you're not going to have relationships. If there's no relationships in your data, then there's no point in using a relational database. Just use a flat file or something. Relational databases makes a lot of sense. So the easiest way to understand this, like I said, is one author has many books, or one parent has many children. That's an easy way, very simple way to understand what we're trying to look at. So we're going to create an example database. Does anybody not have Mysql installed? You all should, hopefully. Sorry, not Mysql, Workbench. Does anybody not have Workbench installed? No? You have it? Awesome. Okay, because we're going to need Workbench. So I asked that question, and then it's quite funny because I don't actually have Workbench installed. It would probably be a good idea if I installed Workbench as I'm teaching the class. I want Community Edition. I hope that's Community Edition. Download. No thanks. Just start my download. I don't want to sign my soul away here. There we go. Yep, good. Alright, while that's happening, I'll move my screen over here. And we might as well set up our lesson while I'm waiting for that to install. So let's go to our servers, right? So there's a few ways you can get to your server. One easy way is open up WAMP, right? Which we already know what to do. Wait for the little icon to hopefully turn green. Click on the icon and tell it to go to your www directory. I don't know if XAMPP has that, but it might. Yeah, I see that. There we go. Once you're in your www directory or your htdocs directory, depending on what application you're using, drill down through comp 1006, and we're going to create a new folder in here. And we're going to call that lesson 03. All good. I'm going to open up lesson 3. I'm going to right click in lesson 3 and choose to open with code. Dark mode on my file explorer. I think if you just go to like Cortana and type in themes and hit enter, I think it's in here somewhere. It's not high contrast. Oh, under colors, it's under choose your color dark. So there's light, dark, and then that. Yeah, or just type dark. Yeah, that probably works too if you just go dark. Oh yeah, see? This pops up. Or turn on dark mode for system wide. Yep. Alright. Unrelated. All right, we got lesson 3 open. Woo us. By the way, somebody had asked me for Synthwave and how to install Synthwave. Inside the resource folder on Blackboard, I put a video from a guy that installs it. I figured it's easier than me recording it. If you have any issues, please let me know, but that's pretty straightforward. The only issue I've ever had with Synthwave is that sometimes it won't enable in VS Code unless you open VS Code in administrator mode. So you might have to open it in administrator mode to get it to work. Cool. Do you guys have a Workbench open? Anybody not opened Workbench yet? No? We're still talking about dark mode and light mode? Alright, cool. I'm going to open up Workbench, and I already have a connection here. It's automatically created by Workbench. It's just linking to the MySQL that's currently running. It's using root. Hopefully that's what it is called. Yay, I'm in luck. It is root. This thing's pretty cool because it does give you this SQL additions thing and all these other snippets and stuff. You can close these off by just clicking these little things here so you don't have to see them. So these things are cool because they can let you see what you want to see. You have an administrator tab which allows you to create like new users and stuff like that, and then you have a schemas tab, which you guys likely already know. Schemas is what we want because that's where we're going to see our databases that we're going to create. Alrighty. We literally just blew past a huge section. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is create a database, but we are not going to do this with the fancy GUI. No. We're going to do this in... How do I zoom in? This text is too small. Is it this gear icon? The query editor. What about general editors? Oh, that's tabbings. Nope. Control plus the scroll wheel. Ooh, nice. Let's go super senior size. Super senior size. There we go. All right, we are going to create a database. We all know how to create a SQL comment, right? This is a SQL comment. Nice and easy to create a SQL comment, right? We are going to create a nice SQL comment stating what we're going to do. We're going to create our lesson 3 DB. DB is short for database. If it doesn't exist, I don't know if you guys have done this kind of stuff yet. Maybe that's a little too big. There, let's zoom down a little bit. Still senior size, but not quite too senior size. Have you guys done a command for create a database if it doesn't exist? How do you create a new SQL window? I think you can't not. Like, if I close this, oh, yeah, it does go away. I think it's just this thing over here. This little icon in the top left corner that says create a new SQL tab. It's interesting because in Workbench on Linux, you can't close it. If you close it, it just opens a new one automatically. But it's opening in the same project? What? If you create one, it creates a new one. It doesn't matter if it opens in the same project. We're going to create a brand new database. You're not even going to overwrite your one from the other class. We're going to create a brand new one. Brand spanking new. So we are going to create, and I like to do this properly. Believe it or not, the title case does not matter. These will execute even if you wrote them in all lowercase letters. And why don't we add comp 1068 to the beginning of it. That way there's guaranteed no conflicts. And a semicolon, because they have to end in a semicolon. So let's talk about what this statement says, this loaded statement. Create the database. Self-explanatory, right? Create a database. Why not? But this is a bit new. What this does is it forces MySQL to verify there isn't already a database called comp 106803. If there is, it will bypass this statement, not create the database, and move on to whatever else it's doing. Okay, so we can actually demonstrate this. We can click the little lightning bolt to execute our code. And as you can see, we've created a database. But if you execute the you can hit refresh here to see your database is created. If you hit the thing again, this time you can see database created, right? It attempts to, but it says one row affected, warning, can't create the database. Come on, give me the full error message. Move over. There we go. Can't create the database comp 1068 because it already exists. So this prohibits you from accidentally creating it again or getting an error. This is more likely. Getting an error like that one that actually stops the rest of your SQL code from executing. Right? You should always create databases this way. And the reason why is it avoids you causing any overwriting. So if MySQL is strict mode is turned off, this can result in you blowing away your database, right? If you don't have this, you could wind up creating your database and blowing away the one that's there. If strict mode is turned off, which likely it's not. Likely it's on by default anyways. But just keep in mind that this is the better way to create your databases. Okay? Databases, however you might say it. Now we're going to tell it which database to use. You guys probably already know this command. How do I tell it which database to use? What's my command? Or maybe you don't know. Yeah, use. We're going to use it. Use comp 1068 underscore lesson 03. Whoops, don't want to save. If I execute, you should get like a GUI update here, right? GUI stands for Graphical User Interface, or GUI GUI good. And it should go black, right? Comp 1068, well, it should go darker, right? It should bold. It should embolden. It should embiggen. That's what it should do. It embiggened. Now we're ready to write get down and create a table. Create the countries table. Now here's that cool line again. If not exists, we can actually create a table if it does not exist. And again, this is also to protect not only against our database not being in strict mode, which would blow away our contents and create a brand new table, but also to make sure that we don't overwrite other tables that we have in there, or also just to avoid our application from continually executing, right? Because we want to make sure that it's executing other records if it needs to be. So we're going to create a table, if not exists, called countries. And then I like to just put in the parentheses like this, like I'm just calling a function. I start off like this because then I can easily see where the opening delimiter and the closing delimiter are. Oh, and I usually like to put a space there too. Then I hit enter to put some space between those two. And I hit tab. And then I start writing out my fields. Right? And we're going to have a few fields here. So I'm going to do an ID field, obviously. I'm going to make it an int of 11 bytes. I'm going to say it can't be null, has to contain a value. And because I'm super lazy and I don't want to have to retrieve the record each time to see what ID it's currently on, I'm just going to have the thing auto increment. So every time I add a new record, it's automatically going to add 1 to whatever current ID it's working on. My next name, or field, sorry, is called name. And I'm going to make it a varchar. Or as Rich Freeman used to say, I think he used to say varchar. It's up to you. The way I see it, it's car because it's character. So we need to write in uppercase only? No, you don't. If you want to write it in lowercase, I don't care. I think you can even right-click and choose to format. There's format somewhere in here. Right there, format. And if you do beautify query, it will actually automatically do it'll fix it. It fixes it. That's what it does. And I'm going to make it not null as well. You guys know what not null means, right? Not null means this can't be null. It can't be empty. Has to contain a value. I'm going to add a description in here. And I mean, we don't need to be ruthless to people. We don't need to make them fill out a description. I am going to limit it to 2,000 characters. I'm not just going to use text, right? And this time I'm going to write null, because it can be null. And you notice I did this all in lowercase letters, but this time I'm going to go to View. Or sorry, no, where was it? Edit. Format. Oh, Control B. See, I learned a shortcut. Control B. I'm just going to Control B that. Or maybe I need to Control A and then Control B. Well, that did not work. Liars. Let's try edit. Edit. Format. Beautify Mysql. It did nothing. Well, now I'm going to have to do it because I have serious OCD and this needs to look correct to me. We'll add population in there. Does that make sense? Countries have a population of peoples. In other words, they're not much of a country. And then we're going to define our primary key. And our primary key is ID, which I think you can use single quotes for. Yeah. Maybe you can't. It's getting mad at me. Why are you mad? It doesn't want to tell me why it's mad. It's just mad. I think you're supposed to use backticks, but I'm going to try just ID because that's the way I'm used to doing it. Uppercase. 100% more common. Actually, you'll notice that when I went to edit and beautify, it automatically made it uppercase. So if I come up to the top, let me try that again. Format. Beautify. I don't know if it did anything. So don't go ahead and hit execute yet. Hold off. We're going to add 2 cool fields that you can show off to your relational database teacher that you guys are going to like. We're going to add 2 fields that when you start working with frameworks out in the industry or just working with data in general, you're going to wind up using these fields all the time. And they are created at and updated at. Don't worry, I know that syntax is incorrect. We're going to fix it in a second. But that's the field names. Created at and updated at. So we need to determine what their data type is. Well, the data type we're going to use is timestamp for both of them. Okay. We're going to make both of them not null. So they're required. And you're going to be like, oh my god, that means I'm going to have to create a date every time, Sean, and put the date into the created at, and that's a pain. But Sean is a super lazy, very, very lazy programmer and would never make you do that. Instead, we're going to define its default. And we're going to use a built-in function that's built right into Sql called current timestamp. And what's going to happen is when we put in a record, it's auto going to create the timestamp and fill it into the field for us. We don't have to provide a timestamp at all. But it gets better. It gets way better. Default, current timestamp, right? We've seen that already. However, on update, so this is a flag that says when a record has been updated, current timestamp. So not only when we create the record will it create a default timestamp for us, I'll widen this and biggin it, it will also on the update that timestamp for us automatically. So we will always have updated perfect timestamps every time. Cool? It's the best 15 lines of SQL you've ever written. So you may want to write yourself a note what these two are doing, but it does read right. Created at timestamp, not null. The default will be the current timestamp. Yeah, I'll totally recap. So create database if not exists means that the database will be only created if we don't already have it. Okay? It won't create the database if comp 1068 lesson 3 exists. This covers two possible problems. One, we're not in strict mode. We already have a database called comp 1068 lesson 3 and we blow it out because this winds up overwriting it. That's bad. But you don't run in non-strict mode anyways. The other one is that it causes an error, right? And none of the rest of our code executes because it got stuck on line 3. This, if not exists, prevents that from happening. Because if it doesn't exist, throws a warning, moves on. Use comp 1068 lesson 3. You guys know what that does. You provided me the code. So you totally know what it's doing. It activates our database, and every command, subsequent command after that point is against that database, right? Create table if not exists. Same idea as this guy up here, right? If the table doesn't exist, it creates it. Again, same scenario. Covering us against strict mode or non-strict mode, and also covering us against the possibility that it's going to error on there and we won't get further. So that's super important. This creates the ID column. Very simple, super lazy, easy to create. Basically what it says is create an ID column. Its data type is an integer with 11 bytes. It is not allowed to be empty. It has to contain a value. And because we're super lazy, we're going to make it auto increment, which means that all it's going to do is every time a record gets added, it's going to auto create a integer and put it in there. It's also going to just add on to the existing past integer. So if the first integer was 1, then the next one will be 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5, and so on and so forth. Name varchar 100 not null. This means I have a field called name. It's a variable character of 100, so you can have up to 100 characters, no more, and it can't be empty. Description, same idea as name, only we're supporting up to 2,000 characters. However, it can be null, so it can totally be empty. We don't require it. Population has to be at least 15, I don't know, 15, sorry, can be within 15 digits. Anything more than 15 digits, we shouldn't be using an int. But yeah, if it's any more than 15 digits, then that's a big country. I don't think we'll exceed 15 digits. And it's not allowed to be null. You actually have to enter the value for that country in there. This is the big one, probably what you actually wanted to cover here, Gerline, which is created at and updated at. Created at is a data type of timestamp. Okay, so it's going to be a date. It's not allowed to be null, but that's fine because we've set a default. And the default value is the current timestamp. Current timestamp is a function that's built into Mysql. When you call it, it returns the current timestamp of the server that the Mysql operation is running on. So that's important to understand, because if the server is in BC, then the timestamp's going to be 3 hours earlier than it is here in Ontario, right? This one works a little differently. It's updated at, same data type, right? It's timestamp, not allowed to be empty. Its default is current timestamp, which means when we first create the record, it's going to put the timestamp in it. However, if we ever update the record with a new value, it will update the timestamp for us. So these things are really cool because they will literally just handle themselves. We don't need to deal with them. They just work on their own. And then the last thing is our primary key. The primary key denotes which one of these fields we're indexing on and is our key that we will be searching by. That's important because you want to index by your ID field. The ID field and the primary key mean that this has to be unique. You are not allowed to have two IDs that are the same. By creating an index called primary key, this field has to be unique. No record in the whole freaking table is allowed to contain the same ID. You guys have covered IDs and primary keys, right? In your relational database class? That's not new. Starts at 1. Yeah, it's one of the few things that actually starts at 1. No worries. Did you guys cover auto increment and primary IDs yet? Or are you learning something new? Oh, okay. Yeah, so databases, right, get super, super big. We need some way to be able to index them, right? The reason why we use IDs is because it allows us to create a unique identifier for our record. We don't want all of our records looking the same. Again, we don't want 2 records with J.K. Rowling in them. We want them to be unique. So we can use primary keys and IDs for that. That's like fundamental 101 of relational databases, is to use an ID with a primary key. And this thing is cool because this means that your IDs will never be the same because it's auto-incrementing, so it's impossible for them to be the same. But this primary key is super important because it forces that rule for us. It forces them that if you were to try to enter in a new record with the same ID, this thing would blow up and say, you can't do that, this already exists. And then the other thing it gives us is an index, which it means that all of these are written into a map, so that when you go and access based on the ID, you get it super, super fast, because it just goes to the index and looks it up. So yeah, primary IDs, super important. There we go. All right. I'm going to Control-AC that, and I'm going to Control-V that for you guys. So if you need it, it's there. But we can also save it, and I mean, why not? We should. Let's go find our file folder, which is in WAMP64, www, comp1006, lesson 3, and I'm just going to call this countries, and save. And there we go. I have this now here. And it's syntax highlighted and it's glowing. So you got to think int 11 is not 11 numbers, right? It's 11 bytes. So it's like 11 full bytes. So that would be, how many records is that? How many rows can int 11 handle? It's a few million. Or billion, maybe. And 4 and 8. Yeah, it's an insane number. It's ridiculously big. You're never going to exceed it. It's like in the trillions. So you can store trillions of records. Sorry, what's that, Gerling? How did you do it? Tell again, please. It was quite fast. How did I do what? Save the SQL? Oh, I just went to File, Save Script. Well, I guess I have to do Save As because it's already saved. And then I went to my C drive, right? I scrolled down to find WAMP64 folder. Okay. Then from the WAMP64 folder, I found my www folder. And I double-clicked on it. And then in the www folder, I went to comp1006. And then from comp1006, I went to lesson 3. And then I saved it as countries.sql. Does that make sense? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you can open up SQL files directly into Workbench. You can also do something super cool that I like to do, which is kind of neat, which is it under server? No, it's under database. See under database this option to reverse engineer? If you click on that, you can actually put your tables out to something called an ERD, which is like a visual interpretation of what your tables look like. So they look like, looks like this. It spits them out to look like this, and you get to see the relationships and stuff like that, which is kind of handy. But we will do that, but we'll do it once we have like a table worth looking at. Anyways, we never executed this. We should execute it. There we go. I executed it. It didn't freak out. I'm going to refresh. Oh, we've got tables. I'm going to click the little arrow. There's countries. There's our columns. We can see all of our columns in here, and if you click on them, it will tell you some information about the columns. So ID is an int11. Name is a varchar. Yeah. Descriptions, populations, created at, right? Tells you that created at is there. And updated at as well. So everything was created nicely. Yay us. We did the thing. You guys proud of yourselves? You should be. So no break quite yet. We're still a little behind. Now we need to connect to our MySQL database using PHP so that we can retrieve our countries. That's the whole point. So we're going to create a new file. I don't know what I'm going to call it. Why don't we call it connect.php. That's what we'll call it. We'll call it connect.php. And this is super easy. We're going to create a PHP block, right? We're going to create a variable to store our connection. So I'm going to call it MySQL I. There we go. And then we're going to use a function that's built into PHP called MySQL I connect, which is used to actually connect to MySQL databases. Don't get hinged on this thing because we are not going to use this forever. There is a much better interface called PDO that is the preferred method for connecting to databases, and it's better supported for multiple database types. However, I like to start with MySQL I because it's much easier to grasp. The PDO is object-oriented. The MySQL I, the way we're using it, is not. So it's a little bit simpler. So the function call for it is MySQL I underscore. Make sure you put the I in there because MySQL connect is deprecated and you will get an error. Connect, like so. That's a function, so make sure you put your parentheses. This function takes, whoops, what the heck is the thing? There it is. This function takes multiple arguments. Notice that the arguments are a string with the host name. So what is our host name? Do you guys know what our host name is? We never taught this, but maybe you know. Do you know it? Yep, it's localhost. So we can put that in right now. Let's put that in. It's localhost, comma. And then the username. So likely, more than likely than not, your username will be root. Okay? Should be root. You likely don't have a password, so you can just put null. And then the name of the database that we're connecting to, which is comp 2068 underscore lesson 03. Here, let me collapse my sidebar. So this is your line. And this should work for everybody, providing you followed along. So once you've done that, we can go to localhost, comp 1068, or 1006, I mean. The lesson folder we want to access, so lesson 03, and then connect.php is what we're going to connect to. And I got an error. No, you're not comp 1068, you're 1006. I think 1 week I said 2068 and that was wrong. Did I call it 1068? What is wrong with me? This is the problem with teaching 2 classes in a night that are so different. I did call it comp 1068. Well, I'm changing that to comp 1006. And I'm changing the database name to comp 1006. Because that's what it's actually called. I am so sorry. I really do this professionally. And then I'm going to execute this. And it's going to create things for me. So now I have 2 databases. So just delete the other one. You can right-click on it and choose to drop the schema. It's going to warn you. Just click drop now and off it goes. And then if you want to resave this, just hit Control S and it should save. Yeah, you're going to have to change that folder name on your own there, Jesse. If you close VS Code, go change the folder name in your file folder structure and then reopen it. No for you. Oh, I have 2068? Do I really? I thought I changed it. I could have sworn I changed it. No, I don't. I have Comp 1006. I changed it a while ago. Oh, in there. Yes. No, you're right. Sorry. Yes, you're entirely correct. We need to change that to 2068 or 1006. I'll be okay, I swear. There we go. Now let's go over here and refresh. Yay, no errors. We did it. We're the wieners. Okay, I think that deserves a 10-minute break. By far. Maybe some Adderall. Let's close these things off. Alright, after this we're going to come back and then we're going to insert a new row into our country's database. So that's our goal. So why don't we come back here at, you know what, let's make it 7:10 and then we'll just power through. Sound like a deal and we'll end early? Makes sense to me. Alright, so let's come back here for not 7:10, 8:10. Alright. Alright, I guess we'll resume here. Okay, I'm just going to dock stuff where it needs to be docked. Expand these things. Okay, cool. So we have our connection, which is awesome. Let's take a look at actually entering some data into our database. Now, I know you guys probably started with select, where you guys started with like a database that was already created, and then you use that to be able to like build your stuff, which is cool. And then you built your select statements and were able to read the data. We're going to do it a little bit differently. We're going to start with create because we're going to work on something called CRUD, and that might be a new term for you. Hopefully it's not. You guys likely have done CRUD in other classes before, or maybe you haven't yet. Actually, you probably haven't. Anyways, CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. And it's a very common term in the industry that you're going to hear quite often. Most applications do CRUD of some sort in some way or another. Doesn't really matter what you're doing. Like even if you're playing a video game, video games do CRUD, right? What does I stand for in SQL I? I think it's interface, actually. I think it's the MySQL interface is what it stands for. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Yeah. We're going to actually end up using PDO in the end anyways. We're just using this for the simplicity. Alright, so in order to add new data to the database from our PHP application, we need a few pieces. The database table we want to add a row to. Check. We've got countries. Yes. A connection to the database. Check. We've got that. And a form to collect the values for our row. Well, we don't have that yet. We definitely are going to need a form. So why don't we create a new file and we will call it form.php. We'll kind of keep them a little bit separated and I'll show you how to add them all together in a second. So a cool thing inside VS Code and in many other IDEs is if you hit the exclamation mark, you'll see this option for Emmet abbreviation, and if you hit tab, it should auto-generate a HTML page for you. Let me just fix the setup here, and we'll call this countries, or actually we'll call this new country because that's what it is, and then I will copy and share that with you. So it's exclamation mark and tab, and Emmet will auto complete the whole page for you. We don't necessarily need all of this stuff. Like, I mean, it is nice to have. It is definitely the way we should do it, but we'll get rid of the stuff that's not necessary. Just so it's a little cleaner and easier for you guys to see. Don't even need the language. There we go. Need the doc type though. So we're going to create a new form, so let's just create a form. So you can just type in form, and again, Emmett will come to your aid here. There we go. And we're going to want this form to execute from where it's currently located. And we looked a little bit at this last week. So we're going to use a value that's available to us inside the server global variable, the global associative array. I'm going to use the shorthand echo statement here, which we've seen a couple of times now. And hopefully you guys are getting used to it. Whoops. There we go. So this is going to load in the current server location, which is what we want. So that way it will submit back to where it's being loaded from. And then we want to put the method equals. What method do we want to use to submit our form? Remember what I said last week? Any time we're mutating data or adding data, we should always be using this HTTP method. Do, 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 do. Yes, it's definitely not get. There you go. It's post. So post without the $sign. So cool. We have our form with a connection. So when we submit this form, it will go somewhere. But we're missing some stuff. We're missing some inputs. So let's add some inputs. We'll create one first. We'll just create a div. Like so. And we'll add a label. And I think we'll use this as country name. And then we'll add an input. And we'll make it type text. And we'll give it a name as well, which we'll just call name. So there's our first input field that we're going to create. And we're going to need a few more. Let's look at what we need. So we need a name field because the ID field's auto-generated, so we don't want to create an ID field. We need a description. We need a population. And that's it. So we need 3 fields altogether, and that's all that we need. Because created at and updated are auto-created for us. So let's highlight these 4 lines. Hit Alt-Shift and press down. And that will create a duplicate of the 4 lines below for us. So this part I'm going to make country description, like so. And we'll say this is a description that's required. Maybe we won't make it an input though. Maybe we will make it a text area. Whoa, not sure what the heck I was trying there. There we go. Nice text area works. And then I need another one of these, so I'm just going to copy and paste that. And this guy is going to be country population. And it's not a type, it will be a text, it's number. And it will be population. And we can even actually add a few more field pieces in here, like attributes in here. We could say step equals 1 and min equals 0, which means you can't make it less than 0. And we can go see our form. Our form will load for us. Somewhere I have the actual thing here. Yeah. So I'm going to change this from connect.php to form.php. And that's what our form should look like. Not very fancy. Arguably the styling's pretty hideous. So what am I missing? I'm definitely missing something. Probably one of the most important parts. Yep, need a button. So we can do this in a few different ways. I like creating buttons for buttons, and then I just make it a type submit. But I'm going to call my button create instead of submit, because that seems to me to make more sense. You've got a notice on your page? That's odd. You shouldn't have a notice on your page. What's the notice? Undefined index PHP self? That seems kind of bizarre. Here, I will give you my form piece for you. There you go. Replace yours with that one. Something's likely wrong. Something's not quoted properly or something. Yeah, it could be capitals, could be the issue. If you're missing capitals, then it won't work. It's pretty literal. All right. So here's our form. I'm going to actually copy our form and paste it in here. Awesome. Here's the whole form for those of you that just don't feel like typing it out and just want to copy and paste. Cool. So we have a form and we have our connections. So what's our next piece that we need that we're missing? Form to collect the values, a script to process the form and insert it into the table. That's very true. We do need that. So why don't we create a new file, and we'll call this one process.php. Oh, actually, no, I wasn't going to do that. Yes, I was. Yeah, we're going to do this nice and separately. We're going to make it nice and clean. And this one's going to be very simple. Super simple script. Let's create PHP tags. And for right now, all it's going to do is var dump $_post so that we can see what's in the post body. That's it. All right. Are you ready to put all this together? Sure you are. Let's create a new file. We're going to call this one index.php. This is going to be where our whole creation comes from. So we're going to create a couple of PHP tags. And then we're going to bring in these files and include them in here. And we're going to use a PHP function called include in order to do that. So we're going to go include, and then we're going to give it the path to the file. So it's just local, so all we have to do is just include it the way it is. So I'm going to go connect.php, because I want that one first. Then I'm going to include process.php, because once we submit, it's likely going to hit the process. And then I'm going to include form.php. See how nice and clean that is? So we've separated out our actual code based on their concerns. Connect connects. Form is the form, and process.php is the thing that's going to process our form data. Does that make sense? As opposed to one large monolithic file? Got it. Cool. We're going to explore and include a lot more in depth in the future, but for right now, we're just going to use it this way. So to access this, the cool thing is you can go to lesson 3 index.php like so, which will work, or you can eliminate the index.php part and just go to lesson 3 and it will also work. And the reason that is by default, the Apache server will look for an index file, and if it finds one, it will load it automatically if you don't provide a file name. Neato, eh, Guido? Nice. All right, let's put some data in here. Canada. country description. Today it is very cold. Yes, runs automatically if there isn't a... I can't remember which comes first. If there's a PHP file, I think it loads. If there's an HTML file and a PHP file, then I think it loads the PHP file over the HTML file. If there's an HTML file in there that's called index, it will load it if there's no PHP file in there. The population of Canada is 37 million. So 37123 And then we click create. And it looks like our processing script is working. It also looks like the form submitted back to itself. So we're good. However, this didn't add any data into the database or database, depending on how you want to say that. In order to do that, we need to add some more stuff into our process.php. You missed what part? The part where we created the index.php file? So create a file called index.php, Gerline, and then add this code to it. So essentially what include does, include literally copies the contents of the file that you're including and pastes it in place. So it's not doing anything cool. It's really not that magical at all. It works just like the include from C++, right? Same kind of idea. So when you do include, that's all it's doing. It's copying the entire contents of that file and pasting them in place. But the nice thing about it is, yeah, it's exactly, you're separating the files for modularity because you're able to separate them based on their concerns. So connect does only that. Connect just connects. That's all it does. It does nothing else but connect. Form is exactly that. It's a form. And process does exactly that. All it does is process things. Process is just this. You likely didn't do $_post, Marcos, on line 3. That's why it's saying it's undefined. All right. You guys ready for some cool stuff in the process? So we're already connected. We have our connection. The one thing we need to know is that our connection has a name. It's called MySQL I, right? And we've already created that variable. Now that variable will be available to us in process.php. Here's the reason why. Because in index.php, everything's just getting copied and pasted, and then the PHP executes. So process.php will have access to any of the variables defined in any other file right now, which is a little confusing, and it's definitely not how I would architect our application because it's wrong. But we're going to accept that for now. We're just going to leave it the way it is. So what we're going to do is connect right now. That's what we want to do right now. We want to connect. So we have our MySQL I connection. It's already connected. It's called $MySQL I. So we're going to use that to do a query. We're going to do response equals, or sorry, result, not response. Result equals MySQL I query, and the query takes 2 arguments. What? Yeah, it'll actually have access to everything declared, not from itself. This is where it's a bit confusing. When we execute this file, index.php will copy the contents from all these files and paste them in place. That's the only reason that process.php currently has access on it. However, yes, the sequence does matter. So no, yeah, you're right. So if form is after process.php, no, process.php will not have access to variables defined in the form. Yes, you are correct. Menjinder. There is a better way to do this, and we should do it, where we create a function for the connect, and we use that function, but we'll do that in a future class. We'll make this cleaner in a future class. Right now, it's just the simplicity of it. So we're using a MySQL query. It does require the connection, so that MySQL I that we have, that's our connection. and then it wants the query string. So this is where you type in a select statement, just like you would in any of your SQL that you've worked with so far. Now, I like to split these apart because I find it easier to write it this way than having them bunched up together, and it makes it difficult to read. So what's the command to insert a record? To create a new record in MySQL. So when you're in SQL, what is the command to create a new record? Yep, insert into, and what's the name of our table? You guys forget? Yep, countries. And then I like to write out this part because I find it easier to work with when I do that. Then I'm going to take my Alt key and create two cursors and hit Enter. So this is a lot more readable to me. All right, the fields that we're entering into, what are the names of the fields? We've got 3 fields in our form, and that's what we're entering into our database. What are our 3 field names? Yes, name, description, population. Okay. And notice the names that are in the keys that are in our associative array post, right? We have name, description, and population as our keys, which is super cool. And we can use string interpolation to decode these, which is nice. So the one thing is, though, when you're dealing with non-numerical data in MySQL, it has to be quoted. So name will have to be quoted, description will have to be quoted, but population will not have to be quoted. So write in those quotes just like I did, and there's a reason why we're doing that. It makes it a lot easier to understand your code when you do it this way. We're going to do string interpolation. So I'm going to use curly braces to denote that I'm deciphering a, a variable. Now I'm ready to access these values. Can anybody tell me how I can access name from the post? Just write the code out into the chat. How can I access name from the post array? What would my syntax look like? Close. You're very close. Keep in mind that the key is a string. Closer. I think that would actually work, Marcos. Surprisingly enough, I do think it would work. But again, you've misquoted the variable name. You guys keep writing the variable name wrong. And no, Gerline, that wouldn't work. Because you're accessing the first index, and then you're trying to access name, which would be an array within an array. Yeah. All right, let me help you out, and then you guys can do description. So $_ post, right? We can't just write post. And yes, Marcos, that's correct. We have to quote name. So like this. That's our variable. So what would description look like? Do you guys want to give a go for description? There you go. Yeah, you're totally onto it. $_ post. Description. There you go. And watch these quote characters, eh? That's kind of the reason why we're using these curly braces, because they help protect these quote characters, and means we don't have to escape them. And then $_ post population. And there we go. So that's going to store our value into countries. If we're lucky. So the last step is we're going to write a small little script here that basically just checks to see if there was a nice result, and if there is, then we will echo out a statement like, yay, it was successfully entered. The reason is because population is a number, and in SQL you can actually enter a number into the database without quote characters. In fact, I think quote characters would cause it to throw an error. Yeah, but strings have to have quote characters around them. So the one thing I've noticed that a lot of people have difficulty understanding is what this is doing. This is evaluating our variable. If we weren't to do it this way, and don't follow along, but if we weren't to do this way and we were to hard code it, it would be hard coded like this. This is what it would look like. That's what it would look like. Okay? So all we're doing is replacing those with variables. No, because I think what happens if I do this, it breaks the quote characters. See? And then you would wind up having to escape these in order for it to work, which would be really annoying. So the easier way to do it is by doing what they want you to do, which is use these. The curly braces. That stops the syntax from breaking. Alright, we have one more thing to do, and that's just basically check to see whether or not the result worked, and if it did, then we're all good. And that's just a simple query, so we're going to say if result, then we're going to say echo, the new country was created successfully. Like so. Otherwise, or better known as else, echo, there was an error. Creating the new country. And here's that whole file. So let's walk through what's going to happen. When we get to our page, and I'm just going to clear it by hitting enter. Right now we've got some errors. I'll deal with that in a second. But when we get to our page, what's going to occur is it's going to hit these things in the order they're defined in. So it's going to hit connect.php and load it, which it loaded. Then it's going to hit process.php and load it. So it's copying all this code and pasting it in. That's why we're getting errors. Then it's going to hit form.php and load that. That's why we can see the form at the bottom. Right now, however, we have a whole bunch of errors that you can see here. And if you look at them, they make sense. Undefined index name in process.php on line 11. So if we look at process.php line 11 here, the reason why we're getting this error is because this post does not exist yet, right? Post doesn't exist, so therefore name does not exist yet. So this value can't exist until it's been properly registered, right? So we're going to have a problem right now because post doesn't exist and this value doesn't exist. So we're going to get all of these notices that come through, but that's fine. We're just going to ignore them for now. There are ways we can take care of them, but we're going to ignore them for now for simplicity's sake. And we're just going to fill out the form at the very bottom. So I'm going to type in Canada, very cold, population of 37 million. And then I'm going to click create. So I've clicked create. It's gone through. I can see these posts, and I can see my message. The new country was created successfully. So I can see the echo statement. Looks like everything was good. So I'm going to just double check that inside Workbench. I'm going to go to the table here, right click, and choose to select rows limit 1000. That's going to just create a select statement, and if everything is good, I should see my record inside this table, and I do. There's my record, Canada, very cold, 37 million. Also notice that it created the created at date and the updated at date for me, and I have an ID already. So you should have the record inside your database. What was the error that you got, Gerline? Good. So a syntax error means there's some sort of syntactical error inside your code, right? So you've got a syntax error somewhere inside your code in one of the files. It should tell you specifically which file. So for example, say I forgot my semicolon here, right? That's a syntactical error. And I go to my browser and I hit refresh here. I get this error. Parse error, syntax error, unexpected result, t variable in line, and it tells me the file that the error is happening in and what line the error is happening on. Got it? Cool. What was happening? Were you missing a semicolon or something? Oh, okay. Yeah. That'll do it. All right, so let's break our form. We know that name is required, so I'm not going to enter a name. I'm not going to enter a description or a population. I'm going to leave those, and I'm going to click Create. And right now it's filling these all in with empty, but we get this error. There was an error creating the new country. Well, that's not very handy, is it? Something is wrong. We just don't know what it is. It's always running else for me. So you're always getting an error. It never actually creates a new country for you. So, Manjinder, make sure that your values look the same as mine does. Make sure your result statement is identical to this, because if you have quotes around population, that could cause the problem. Or if you're missing quotes around description or name, that can cause the problem. But in about 2 seconds, we're going to find out exactly what's causing the problem, because we're going to get the error message back. So the way we can get the error message back is by storing the error that had actually occurred. And the way we do that is we're going to create a variable called error. We're going to use the function MySQL error, and we're going to pass it our connection. So MySQL I. Now I want to see what this error is, so I'm just going to create another echo statement, add in a BR tag, and then output the error in here as well. Like so. So I've stored the error that's being happened on the MySQL server, and this will return the last known error that hit the MySQL server. Store it in this variable called error. Then we're going to echo that error out. We're adding the break tag so that it goes to the next line. So now if I hit create, my error is you have an error in your SQL syntax. Check the manual that corresponds to your MySQL server version for the right syntax to use near this closing parenthesis, which it's referring to this closing parenthesis. So what its problem is that the syntax that I put in was 2 empty quote characters, and then no number. So I had a problem with the no number. Now, interestingly enough, I think if I add in 37 people in here and hit create, yeah, you see it says the new country was created successfully. Why was it created successfully even though we didn't pass a name? What did we technically pass? Well, no, we didn't pass null. I mean, technically, this value was null, but You're getting an out of range value for column population at row 1. So I'm guessing that likely when you created your table, you created the population value with a very low number, like the integer number. Or you didn't make it an integer. You made it something else, possibly. I'd have to see what you did for your SQL. Do you have quote characters around this? Around population, Minjinder? Okay. Yeah, so the reason why it's creating it is because of these silly quote characters here. These quote characters are actually creating an empty string. Technically, an empty string, even though it's an empty string, is still a value. It's actually storing the empty string into our database for us. So if I, again, refresh this, I can see that I have an empty string, and then 37, even though these values are not allowed to be null. So there's a few ways we can deal with that. We can deal with that by looking at the values the person has passed and then deliberately throw an error when they pass it. And that will be one way to get rid of it, to get rid of the errors. You're still getting that value error. Okay, I need to see the SQL for your database. Can you give me the SQL you saved? Just post it in the chat. Int 15 not null. Looks correct to me. Your query here, can you post this query for me? One second, Marcos, and I'll deal with that question. Into countries, name, population, post name, post description, post population. Yes, it would be better to populate with null and have it throw the proper error than to put in empty values. And that is the case. I'm wondering if we were to take the quote characters off of these, if that would work. Marcos, just give me 1 second and then I'll tell you whether that would work. I think we have to have the quote characters though because it has to be a quoted string. Unless, because we're using Mysql 8, that changes things. It might be the case. So this should result in an error. Yeah. And then if I create a country called ASDF with a population of 1, 2, 3, 4, see, that's the thing. So you can't do it because what happens is now it's treating ASDF as a column in the database. It has to be quoted. There is a way to get it to properly react, and I'm trying to remember how you do it. I might have to look that up. Yeah, now it's just going to freak out about other things. Right, because there was no thing. Yeah, there's a way to do that. So Minjinder, you have countries, and in your table it's countries. Population. Can you output, like, are you dumping your post values? Can you show me what the value of your post is? Oh, it's working now. What was the issue? Was something... Oh, okay. Cool. The coding gods have honored you. They have smiled upon you. I mean, if it works, it works. That's all that matters. Alright, we should create a few more countries in here. I mean, I've got a few right now. I'm just going to create some ASDF country. There we go. So that should be about 4 countries, I think, is what I have right now. You guys might have more or less. I've got 5 countries altogether. That works for me. I don't mind 5 countries. Alright, so what we want to do now is actually produce a table and show the data from this in a table. So the way we're going to do that is, actually let's handle a couple of problems first. First of all, I don't want to keep dumping the post values. So let's get rid of the post that's in the process.php. And then the second thing I want to do is I want to basically say if, you know, the post exists and is set, then go ahead and execute this code. Otherwise, don't execute this code. So we're going to write a statement that is if, how am I viewing the database in SQL? If you go into here in Workbench and you like unfold this little thing at the side so that you can see the tables, and you right click on countries and then choose to select rows limit 1000, it should show you the table. Did it work for you, Alec? Not that it matters. We're going to pull it up in our own table in about 2 seconds. We're going to make our own table in a minute. So on line 3, we're going to do if is set, like so, $_post, like so. Then execute the code inside here. And the code we're going to execute is all this wonderful code. So let's go ahead and select all of that code. And all I'm going to do is cut it, right? And then I'm going to paste it. So it's Control X to cut. And then I'm pasting it. And I think if I right click, oh, I don't have a format for PHP. So I'm going to have to come up and actually tab it in. There we go. So everything is inside this if is set post. Sorry, for a real web page, would you have the HTML file calling the index.php? No, because it can't anyways. HTML cannot render a PHP page. Like, you can't even include it in the HTML page. However, you can include an HTML page in a PHP page. That does work. Yeah, so now what this is solving is when we go to our form and we just hit enter. No, it should have stopped that from happening. If is set $post, so that's the problem. $post must be set. Actually, and then we can just do this. If $_post name. So we're just basically saying if name exists. Or maybe we have to do is set there as well. That's annoying. Yep, we have to do is set name. Which, I mean, if that's what we're doing, forget is set post. Let's just do is set name. Just by itself. There we go. That works better. It didn't show an error for you? You might be having a post value still. You might still have a post value. That's why. Alright, so what we want to do is make it so that when we add in a record, it shows the records in a table. You guys have written HTML tables before. I remember teaching this in one class and they had never touched an HTML table. Have you guys ever worked with an HTML table before? Oh, good. Thank God. They had a teacher, and for whatever reason, that teacher never got to HTML tables because they got stuck on so many other HTML things. That's fine. Even if it's super lightly, Jesse, that's fine. Let's right-click and choose a new file, and we'll call it table.php, like so. And we're literally just going to write the table out. We're not even going to do any HTML in here. Like, we're not going to do the whole HTML page. We're just going to literally write a table. Okay? It's going to be super cool. Super, super cool. So I'm going to type in table and let Emmett take control here. There we go. We have table. I'm going to create a T head and a TR. And then in the TR, I'm going to create a TD. So the T head will be the heading for our table. Okay? So in our table, no, it's not thread, it's T head. So THEAD, like that. So not thread, more like TED. And we're going to have name. And we're going to have description. Whoops. And we're going to have population. Like so. And then we're going to create a T-body. And this is where things are going to get interesting. All right, you guys still with me? We are going to connect to our database, which we already have our connection called MySQL, and we're going to grab all of the records currently inside our database. So let's write some PHP up here, just a little PHP block. And we're going to call it results. Actually, we can't call it results, we'll call it rows. MySQL query. We need to give it our connection, MySQL and then the query. So it'll just be select star from countries. Very simple query. Super simple. Okay. And then, oh, sorry, you know what? Let's rename rows to result, because we're actually going to have to call it result. Then we're going to call this one rows. MySQL fetch all $result MySQL ASOC. So here's what's happening with this particular, yes, no, you don't need to. It's not going to error out if you do it, but you don't need it. So here's what's going to happen. This is going to actually execute the MySQL query select star from countries and return back a result set to result. However, that result does not have all the rows that we need it to have. We have to get MySQL to actually format it. So what we do is we call MySQL fetch all. We pass it the results, and then we tell it the format that we want the result to be formatted in. These two queries kind of have to go together because they produce what we need in order to be able to get the rows that we can actually iterate through. So whenever you're doing queries on the database and you're selecting data, you're always going to wind up doing these two statements together. A select statement and then the MySQL fetch all statement. We're going to do it quite often. So now we should have all of our rows, and we can actually check that if we do a var dump of $rows, whoops, $rows, like so. And then in our index.php file, we will include our table.php. So if I refresh, you can see I've got all of these rows in here now that we're var dumping, and you should have those rows too. So make sure you have this code inside table.php, And then in index.php, make sure you're including the table.php. So now how do we take all these rows and actually display them in our table? Yeah, I can, I guess. There's no scrolling down in index. What do you mean, can I scroll down index.php? There's only 4 lines. Oh, no, in Chrome. Why? Why am I scrolling down in Chrome, Gurleen? Named Des Popple at the end. Down here? This thing? They're the table headings. Yeah. Yeah, they're the table headings. They're being caused by the table.php. That's these headings here. Yeah. Alright, we're going to get rid of this var dump, but we can actually just comment it out. If you click beside it and hit Control question mark, it will comment out the line for you. MySQL, because it's MySQL I underscore ASOC. Manjinder. It's this. There you go. So it's not MySQL ASOC, it's MySQL I ASOC. Which stands for MySQL I Associative Array, which is what it's doing. It's actually turning these into associative arrays. Alright, so now we're going to iterate over these and actually produce them. So I just shut off the var dump so you can't see the var dump anymore. Yeah. So your MySQL result, right? You should have a result back from select star from countries. And then you're passing that to the MySQL I ASOC. It expects this to result in either a true or false statement. So make sure this looks like that. Here, I'll just copy this and give it to you. There you go. Alright, so we're going to actually, inside our T-body, we're going to iterate over all of these rows and display them. And there's a few different ways we can do that. It gets kind of tricky, but we're going to use string templates a little bit, and we're going to use something called the for each loop. So here's how a for each loop works. So first of all, we're going to need PHP inside this block, and yes, this is totally legal. Remember, that's the cool thing about PHP. We can bump into HTML and jump right back into PHP again if we want to. So we're going to need to make sure this is formatted correctly. So we're going to need a TR tag. And we're going to need the closing TR tag. Then we're going to need the TD tags. And we're going to wind up needing 3 of those altogether. So we'll just duplicate them 3 times with using Alt-Shift. So this is a normal structure, which is good. If I refresh, yeah, everything's okay. Now I'm going to wrap this in a for each loop. So we're going to do for each $rows. So the thing that I want to iterate over, so rows is an array of values right now, as $row. So I'm taking one item from that row and casting it into this variable called row. Then I'm going to echo all these statements like so. And there we go. And if I refresh, you're not going to really see anything yet. So for each, we'll iterate over the array of rows. On each iteration, it casts the whatever value it's on into this variable called row. And now we can use row inside of our PHP in here. And so we'll just use the, the curly braces. So I want to put curly braces on these 3 lines. So I'm going to hit Control Alt and press down twice. And then I can type those in at the same time. which is pretty cool. So I'm just going to do $row with the square brackets and the quote characters in them, because those are all going to look the same. Then in the first one, I'm going to have name. Second one will be description. And the last one will be population. Just like it is in our database. And there we go. There's my table. And now I should be able to add new ones, like land of Sean, description, Seanopolis, population, just me. And there we go. Land of Sean, Seanopolis, 1. You got errors? Okie dokes. What is the, like, many errors? Okay. Maybe we should do a screen share for that one. Just give me 1 second before I deal with people's errors. Let me copy this code and share it with everybody. So here's the code, the final code that we resulted in. And I want to talk a little bit about... I'll jump over here and actually do it over here. Today, we've got some fun stuff. Today, we have our first lab. Let me zoom in a little bit. There we go. Ooh, labs. All right, don't forget to download the lab.zip. I don't know how many times I've had students do labs and hand in something. I don't know where they got it from. They just hand in something. And it's like, you didn't even download the labs.zip. So your code's wrong and you need to redo it. So just make sure that you download the lab.zip. All right, so creating and reading data. To reinforce today's learning, there's a lesson plan link. Submit tomorrow by midnight for full marks. That's wrong. Submit by next class by midnight for full marks. Don't ignore these sometimes. They're copy and paste errors. Just look at the, I think if you click on it, yeah, so February 8th, 2021 by 11:59. That's the actual due date, okay? So don't pay attention to things like that. Yeah, no, it's not going to be just one day. That's terrible. Make sure you read all the instructions. So, code uses clean formatting is 5 points. Comments provided for complex logic. Brackets used where logical. So, clean, like clean, tabbing, right? I don't like everything buttered up against the left-hand side, stuff like that. All right, so, and brackets used where logical, so make sure you're using brackets, right? And parentheses and like square brackets, all those wonderful things. Comments, if you write some really complex logic, maybe you want to go out on a limb doing this lab and make it super stellar. Make sure you're putting in good comments so I can read them. Steps are completed correctly. So that's 15 points. This is divided by the number of steps. So there's 3 files. There's a form file, an insert file, and a table file. And that's it. Just 3 files. So make sure you follow the instructions in those files. You'll see step 1, step 2. It even tells you the order to do the files in. There's an instructions file in there. Make sure you read it. Code is functional without errors. Gets 10 points. So unfunctional code automatically loses 1/3 of whatever the value is, and that's true for most assignments. So make sure it's functional. Do not remove the steps from the file. Add your answers below the steps. I will not labs missing the steps. I'm assuming that's supposed to say I will not mark labs missing the steps. So make sure the steps are in place. I think I have an auto parser for this one that kind of like marks it for me. So that's probably why. But yeah. Can we do PHP inside HTML instead of HTML inside PHP? Oh, yes you can. I didn't want to do that just because I didn't want to confuse everybody. But I'm happy to show you how to do it, Minjinder, if you want to see. You want to see it, don't you? What I will tell you is that things that end with curly braces, there are single line expressions for those. So for example, PHP for each can also be written like this. And we are going to do this in class at some point. But you can write it like this. So that is the same for each loop as this, but now you can write simple HTML in there. Because it automatically closes. So, does that make sense? I'll copy and paste that into the chat channel. Yeah, it's pretty cool. We're going to wind up doing a lot of that because I really like fully embracing PHP as a templating language. So I like to use it like a templating language. All right. I am going to stop sharing my screen. And Gerline, if you want to share yours, we can resolve that error. Oh, it worked. Okay. Did you figure out what the problem was? You just used my code. Okay, that works too. Cool. Well, that's it. That's all I have for tonight. It's kind of cool that we ended a little earlier than usual, but yeah. Oh, GitHub. Yeah, we can do GitHub if you want to. Is it normal to be pretty confusing at this point? Yes, it is, Marcos. 100%. Yeah. We're going to be doing, like, the lab's going to give you practice, which should help reinforce what we learned tonight. So that should definitely help. But we're going to be doing a lot of this over and over again. So you should get pretty familiar with it. All of these lessons are designed to be self-consumed in one lesson. So it's not like we're building something. I know the way the PHP course used to be taught is you were basically building a gigantic application, and that was so much more difficult for everybody. Yeah, it can be pretty fun. It's just, I don't know. It's got some issues that I'm not a big fan of, but some people like it. Mine says MySQL query expects parameter 1 to be MySQL bool. So if that's the case, Esteban, probably what's happening is your result doesn't contain a boolean. It's throwing an error. So check your query and make sure your query is correct. On line 2. So make sure this says select star from countries and that you're actually selecting the star from the countries. Yeah, definitely. And I left behind. I don't know what the error is. Okay, well I can't help you if I don't know what the error is. We have to at least know what the error is. I'm sorry, Gerline, what do you mean? It seems let's figure out lab 1 first. Just that you want to see whether or not you like PHP? I don't know. Forget it? Okay, forget it. It's forgotten. I don't know. So far it's just Q&As. I guess we can set up Git. I'm totally okay with it. Let's start with just at least setting up, like, Alec doesn't want to set up Git. Let's do it. Alright, if you want to stay and learn Git, you can stay and learn Git. Otherwise, you can jump ship. Totally your choice. Sweet. Alright. In order to start with Git, we need to install it. So, I believe it's called git-scm.com downloads. So navigate here first. And then download the correct one for your operating system. Oh, share screen. Yeah, I guess that would be helpful, wouldn't it? There you go. I need to open the chat channel. Yeah, no worries. GitHub from the Microsoft Store. What? I don't know. I've never heard of GitHub from the Microsoft Store. I don't know what that is. It might be different. I'm sure it installed Git locally for you, though. That's really what it boils down to. So what you want to do is download the Git for your... Okay. Run it. Install it. Just click Next repeatedly. So, yeah. You're going to click Yes. And then it's going to ask you to install. So, do I have Git running? No, I don't. Okay. So, I'm going to click Install, which I should do anyways because there's an update for it. So, that's the weird thing about this one. When there's an update, you literally just reinstall. Can I change directory? Will it cause a problem? I wouldn't change the directories. Just let it install where it's going to install. Mostly because it adds, so what it does is it adds a path variable to Windows that will point to that Git binary, and if you change where it's installing, it might not add the path variable, and then you would have to go manually add it. Yep, that's all I do. If you know how to add the variable, then go for it. Yeah, that's literally all. It's just making sure the path is pointing to the correct binary. Yep. Alright, if you launch Git Bash, you'll get a different terminal than PowerShell, which is kind of nice. So which folder do I add? I don't know. I don't know where the binary is. You're the one that selected the different folder and told it to install there. You need to remember which folder you had. Let's go with C. just roll the dice and choose a random folder. Go with the recycle bin folder. That's a good folder. No, we don't need to view the release notes unless you really want to read the release notes. So now I use Git from the command line. Many instructors don't, but I use it from the command line because I like control over Git. Oh, there was an option to launch the bash, but if it didn't launch for you, that's fine. Just in your Windows, like type in bash, and you'll see an option for Git bash. And then that will load up like that. Got it. Cool. Now I want you to close it. Close it, and what we'll do is we'll add lesson 3 that we've been working in to Git. I mean, that makes perfect sense, right? They are kind of. So Git is local and GitHub is remote. So the idea is that you can run Git locally all the time, save your stuff inside your own personal repository locally, and never ever actually push to GitHub at all. The whole idea of Git is it's a version control system. So the idea is that you make changes in your files and you commit those changes. And then if you ever need to, you can go back in time and roll your code back to another point if you aren't happy with the changes that you made. So that's the cool thing about it. Yeah, it's called version controlling. The power of adding GitHub to it, though, is that it gives you the ability to take your code and store it remotely. So that way when, your computer fries itself or something like that, you still have access to your code. But not just that, it also gives you the ability to share your code with other people. So once you work in the industry, that's what you'll be doing all the time. You'll be constantly working in the same code base as other people. Alright, this is the cool thing about Git, that Git that we downloaded. If you right click in this folder, you can Git bash here. And if you do that, it will literally open this terminal to the correct folder for you. Yeah, no. Yeah, once you learn Git, you don't use USB to store code at all. Yeah, for sure. Alright, so now I'm in the folder that I'm in. I just want to make sure Git's installed, so I'm going to type in git-v. Or no, sorry, it's git-version, right? Some of these work with just -v, some don't. If we didn't do that, could we still navigate? Yes, like cd? Yes, of course. You can just cd till you get into the directory. Incidentally, the easiest way to do that, Matt, is to just copy the address from this bar, like so. Type in cd, type in a quote character, insert it. I don't know where my insert button is on this stupid keyboard. There is no insert button on my keyboard. That's weird. You can also right-click and it will paste. And then quote character and hit enter, and it will cd into that directory. cd stands for change directory. Git GUI is using Git from an interface. So Git GUI, which is this guy here, allows you to create a repository, clone a repository, open an existing repository. So you can just do it all using the actual interface. I don't like it though, because sometimes it messes up your repositories. Function plus delete, maybe? Ooh, sounds tasty. Oh. Yeah, I would learn how to use the command prompt before you learn to use the GUI. Less chances of you messing something up, to be honest. Alright. We've got this over here. Let me show you how to add the pieces that we need. So we have our lesson, right? Wait, what? What did git-version do? It just showed me the version. Yeah, just to verify Git's installed. Yep. Okay, hold on. Let me zoom in so you guys can see what I'm doing. Alright. The first thing I want to know is if I have file changes, right? Actually, no, sorry. The first thing I want to do is initialize Git. And I want you to see this as it happens. Oh, this stupid thing. Hold on. I need to fix that because I can't stand it. There we go. There's a shortcut set that like literally causes it to close all those. So I want you to see what happens in this folder. So I'm going to type in git init. That's your first command. What that does is initializes an empty repository inside this folder for us. I don't know why it's not showing. You can see it in your file folder system. If you look, can I zoom in on this? No, I can't. You can see a new folder called .git. If you have hidden files turned on, then you can see the .git folder. Now I'm able to check to see what changes are in my Git, which there should be lots. So what I can do is type in git status, and that will show me the things that are currently not being tracked. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to type in git add dot, and what that will do is it will take all the files inside my folder and add them to my local Git repository, like so. Just ignore this error, this weird LF error. Now if I type in git status, they're all green because they're all now staged, is what it's called. Staged and ready to be committed. That leads to the next command, which is git commit -m, and a message, whatever message you want, my first Git, or whatever you want to call it. So the commands we have executed so far are git init, git add dot, and git commit -m, my first Git. So now if we were to end now, we'd be fine. Everything is committed. We're good. We can move on with our lives and go live the rest of our night. However, if we don't want to keep everything just on our local machine, we need a remote server. So a remote repository like GitHub requires us to actually sign up for GitHub. So if you go to github.com, -m is for the message. It's so that you can keep a track of what your Git is about, like what your repository is doing. So every time you make a commit, you should add a very verbose message so that you know what the commit was for. You missed the last step. The last step was the... Did you do Git Add dot already, Gerline? For example, if I'm pushing code... Okay, well then you need... Did you do Git init, Gerline? Okay, so then you need to do Git Add dot and then Git Commit -m my first Git. Those two steps. Yeah, status just tells you what's going on. Status doesn't actually do anything, but yeah, it just tells you what's going on. A good example would be, say you made a change to a configuration file in your code. You would state added new REST URL, for example. Or you made a change in an API endpoint. Change the API endpoint. So it's just basically, yeah, exactly. So that way you can go back, if you ever need to, you can go back and be like, what the heck did I do here? Oh, right. And then look at the commit message. Is it giving you an error, Gerline? Huh? I don't understand. Why are you opening up VS Code? Yeah, it shows in the folder. It doesn't seem to show on VS Code. VS Code seems to hide it. Yeah. Yeah, I just need to change the configuration for mine. It's still pretty new on this machine. I don't generally use this machine for day-to-day coding. How do you know it's not working, out of curiosity? I'm trying to figure out why you think that it's not working. Yeah. Does it not say anything? Oh, yes. Okay, sometimes, yeah, that will happen. So what you can do is just follow the instructions that it says. So it's probably asking you for your name, likely. Yep, and then you just enter your email address. It requires that. It's going to definitely require when we go to connect up to GitHub. So it is working. It's just asking you some stuff. You just need to fill out those details. Why, did you bypass it? There's a wait. Hold on. Git add user email and name. Right. You need to type in this instruction. So git config -- global user.name Gerline car. So you need that one. And then you will need git config -- global user.email. I don't know what your email address, your email. Like so. That's it. Okay. What did you ask? So can we use Git to push code to GitHub? Yes, you actually use Git to push code to GitHub. Just let me wait for Gerline to catch up. Let me know when you've got your config in. And then type in git status before you do anything after that, okay? Git was created by... I'm not sure, actually. GitHub's owned by Microsoft now. GitHub didn't used to be owned by Microsoft, though. They bought it recently. Bought it 2 years ago now? Okay, now do your email address with that code I just gave you. Right? Just make sure you replace your email with the your email address. They're different fundamentally, right? So Git is meant for local and GitHub is meant for remote. But Git itself is the command line interface to be able to connect to remote as well. You can use Git for other things than just GitHub. You can use it for Bitbucket. You can use it for GitLab. You can use it for Firebase. There's a whole bunch of different repositories that are out there that you can connect Git to. Git's just the command line interface. Are there any similar platforms for the same reason? I don't know about locally, Marcos, but I do know that for remote, like I said, there's GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab. We use GitLab at LabX Media, where I work. Okay, type in Git status, Gerline, and tell me if you have green or red. I don't know, actually. I don't know Manjinder. It's red? Okay, so you need to do the git commit command. So you're going to do git commit -m, my first git, like that. You can do git add, but it probably already has been staged. Oh, no, yeah, you're right. Sorry, it is git add that you need to do. So it's git add dot. Dot stands for the files that you want to add. Dot is a wildcard, which means it will add all the files in that folder. You're doing this from your lesson 3 folder, right, Gerline? Just to be clear. Okay, good. I taught this 1 year, and a guy did it from his C directory. That was not a good thing. So when we update the repository, does it save a copy of the old version? Yes, it does. So every time you make a change, the old copy stays there. In fact, what it does is it only pushes the changes up. So it's not like it completely overwrites all the files that are up there. It only pushes the changes up, and you can actually go visually see them. It's pretty powerful. Yes, you will. So you'll literally do 4 commands every single time. Not when we first set it up, though. When we first set it up, it's a little different. But after it's set up, it's the same 4 commands. All right, Gerline, are you good? Did you have it commit? Not quite yet. We need to set up the thing. What? When I use git commit, it says did not match file. What happens when you type in git status? Yeah. It's going to take a lot longer if we do it this way. It's too hard when I can't see. Oh, it's green. Finally. Yeah, it should be green, but you need to be able to git commit. How are you typing in git commit? It should be git commit -m. Just whatever message you want in there, I guess. You need to use -m. You have to give a message. I think there's a way to bypass that, but I don't remember how. All right, all good? It just does that. I think I set the theme for it at some point. I don't remember when, though, but I think I did. Oh, right. Can't do Control L. I really hate that I can't do Control L. Clear. All right, we're good? Okay, cool. So next, we want to go to GitHub and sign up. So click the sign up button in the top right. I'm not going to tell you how to sign up. Just sign up and follow the instructions. I'm going to sign in. Yeah, GitHub desktop will work. It's arguably it will work easier. But I don't use it, so I really can't really help you with it. Once you've signed up to GitHub, though, let me know, because you might have to verify your email address. You already have an account? Okay. Gerline, let me know when you've signed up. And anybody else who's following along. Okay. Are you waiting on a verification email, or did it send one? Like, can you get in? Okay. So once it gets logged in, you should see repositories at the top here with the green new button. So we're going to click that green new button. And that's going to allow us to create a new remote repository. Now, I'm in dark mode, and you can set yours to dark mode, but just leave it for now. We're not going to worry about that. So the repository name, when I name for lessons, is I name it with the course code, so Comp 1006, and then the name of the lesson that I'm working with. So this is lesson 3. Like so. You can literally name your repository the same because they're unique to your username. I make it public, but you can make them private if, for example, say it's a lab or something. You may want to make it private, which will stop somebody from taking your files. You don't need to initialize it with a readme or a git ignore or anything like that, because we're going to just literally pave right over top of it anyways. You're just going to click Create Repository when you're done. So once again, I've named my repository, I'm choosing public, and I'm going to click Create Repository. And the cool thing about it is it's going to show you the instructions of how to connect to the remote repository. So it even tells you the git init that we did. You don't need to do this line though, the git add readme. The git commit -m first commit, so it's even that got that commit statement. Then it's about creating the branch as our master branch. So we're going to do git branch -m main, and that will create a master branch. So again, that's still local. It's only affecting local things. All we've done is change from our branch being called master to our branch being called main. That's all we've done. Then we need to add our remote origin, and I find it much easier to just copy this like so, come over here, right click to paste it, and hit enter. And that will add the remote origin to my repository, to my local repository. The last step for setting this up is to do git push -u, the location, which is origin, which really is just the remote. It's the remote that we added. And then the name of the branch that I want to push to, which is called main. When I hit enter, it's going to take a look at the code that's different compared to what's online, and it's going to push that code up to GitHub. So that's when it's complex, right? Those instructions are a little bit more complex, and I'm going to just write them down quickly in here. So it's git init, git add dot, git commit -m init, okay? Then it will be git branch -m with a capital M, main, okay? And then git remote add origin, https://github.com/username/repo. Obviously, you'd replace that with your address. And then git push -u origin main, which sets the upstream. So the upstream is when I push or pull, it tells my local Git where to push and pull. Only for this folder, though. That's not your whole computer wide. It's just for this particular project we're working on. Now, once all that is done, as I make changes in my folder, I only run these 4 commands. Git add dot, git commit -m, things have changed, git pull, git push. That's it. And what that does is git add dot stages my changes, git commit -m commits my changes, so now that it's locally I'm set. Git pull pulls any changes there might be online that I don't have down, and git push pushes all my changes up. That's set up when you set up the Git. So when you do git init and then you set your remote origin, you're setting the repository for that particular project that you're working on. That's how it knows. So you're going to initialize in the project folder that you're going to push. Yeah, exactly. So for example, say you want to push lab 1, which you get bonus points if you do this, by the way. Say you want to push lab 1, right? You're going to cd into lab 1, and then once you're in there, you're going to do git init, git add dot, git commit -m, git branch -m main. Then you're going to go on to GitHub. You're going to create a repository. You're going to come back to your folder or back to your shell, and you're going to do git remote add and then the name of that repository link, right? Then you're going to do git push -u origin main, and now you're ready to go. That's it. You've set it up. You've got your initial code sitting in Git, and you're ready to do what you need to do. After that, anytime you make changes, it's just those 4 commands. Git add dot, git commit -m, git pull, git push. That's it. After that point. So now my code is up here. You just can't see it because I haven't refreshed, but once I refresh, all these instructions disappear, and you can see my code. Okay, no worries. You can always reach out on Slack too, Gerline, if you get stuck. No worries. Anyways, that's it. I mean, that's not all of Git. There's a lot more to Git. You can do really a lot of stuff with Git. Git and GitHub tutorial. There was a really good tutorial by GitHub themselves. Yeah, here it is. Hello world. This is a really good tutorial. I haven't seen this in a long time. This is made by GitHub, and they walk you through the whole process and explain it more in depth. But it's definitely worthwhile. They have been getting into creating a branch learning about pull requests and merge pull requests. These are all things you're going to want to know for when you go out to your co-ops. If you know this stuff and they don't have to teach you this at your co-op, that's a huge win for you. All right? Awesome. Cool. Cool. All right, super late. I've been up since 5 working. I'm done. I am burnt out. I need to go have a drink and go to bed. Yeah, no problems. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you next week. My pleasure. Cheers.